right? So just see if anything in there sticks out to you. So it's Fae. They point out that the toadstool is kind of like a UFO.
Yeah, I thought that.
Look up in the leaves of the tree.
Holy fucking
It's the green
shit. Man. What?
It's the green man just hiding out, watching.
Wow, it's so subtle. It blends so well. Faces in the trees. Faces in the trees. And in the tree can be seen the face of a green man, similar to the church carving illustrated in chapter 5.
So it's literally the green man.
It says the object in the foreground may be stylized toadstool, but in certain respects, it also resembles a UFO. Can't stand it. I love it.
So Edidorpa is this tale that I dug up regarding these caves and this interconnected case that was published in the 1860s, and it details this case of this mysterious stranger appearing in this man's study, claiming that he is from within the earth. And the book ends up detailing this mysterious stranger's journey, which begins in Cincinnati and actually descends down into Kentucky onto the same line of latitude that we're looking into this phenomena. And from that point, it ends up delving into these cave systems where the man is guided by a creature that comes up from the subterranean realm and guides him to this location that is referred to as the unknown country. So when this man is led to this cave entrance, he starts getting trepidatious about what his adept guide is actually leading him towards. He actually thinks he's about to be murdered. So in his haste, he grabs this bar that he finds on the ground, and he goes to strike this man. And before he can strike this man down, this cold, clammy hand grasps him from behind. And this man turns around, and he's confronted by this pale creature without a face that's dripping wet. It's something that crawled up from this cave system, and it can speak. And it tells the man that their intention is not to harm him, only to guide him to this location that exists within the earth. From this point, as the story progresses on this man's journey, as he delves deeper into the earth, he is presented with these trials that he has to overcome, these trials that are designed to keep him trapped somewhere in this space. And one of the last trials that he encounters is this troop of beautiful women that appear in the cavern. They have this light glow about them, wearing these flowing dresses, silk and white, holding instruments and wands. And the head of this beautiful troop of women that he's just enamored with, she presents herself as Edidorpa. So with all of this said, I still didn't understand the reference. I didn't understand why they would title the book this, since it had such a small role. And it wasn't until doing further research that I realized Edidorpa is Aphrodite, spelt backward, who is the goddess of Venus. So in an offhanded way, this book title is Venus in a subversive manner. And what's so interesting about that, and how it connects into all of this, apart from showing allusions to things that could be goblins, as well as ships that can fly over the water, like UFOs, is the fact that back in the 1950s and the 1960s, you had so many contactee reports of people talking about running into these spaceship beings claiming they were from the planet Venus. You often find Venus being associated with trickster elements, trickster spirits, as well as even fallen angels. You see Lucifer himself being associated with the morning star, which of course is the planet Venus. So when you break down the associations of Venus and what that represents in different cultures, as well as Aphrodite, the goddess of love, you see her image in fertility idols, ancient fertility idols. And when you look at these fertility idols, you often see representations of entities that even resemble images that Crowley drew of this entity that he called Lamb.
Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah.
Weird.
That's actually really interesting.
The eyes are exact.
That's an old fertility statue, a Kuba.
It's fucking AWAS.
Wow.
Lamb itself appears to be one of the earliest representations of an extraterrestrial or a modern age gray alien.
I mean, some occultists actually think that it was because of a ritual that Crowley did in 1917 in New York City that actually was what opened a gateway for these gray aliens to first come into our world, and that the image that he drew of Lamb is the first gray alien. Whitley Strieber, one of the most famous alien abductees of all time, he wrote Communion. He described these familiar beings that he met as being similar to the Sumerian goddess Ishtar. What Greek goddess was modeled after Ishtar? Aphrodite.
All of these things are connected. You have Lamb, you have extraterrestrials,
The Greys, Crowley, Ashtar,
Venusians,
Aphrodite, descent narratives, euphonauts.
cave creatures, goblins.
Sit down. I'm gonna send you home with a present. I'm gonna send you home with something to think about.
This is just so weird.
The timing of it was what?
Who writes like this? Are you guys serious?
The timing of it scared the fuck out of me. Don't you remember how upset I was when I was like, I can't believe so many people have seen this thing.
Yeah.
It was because I was positive it had gotten out and somebody was fucking around. Because the use of the word euphonauts right away, I was like, oh, this can't be fucking real. And the craziest part about all these emails is she gave so much information in them, we found her immediately.
You actually found her?
Yeah.
Oh, fuck yeah.
Well, because I was gonna say,
Karl.
there's so it's so opposite from the others with the information that it feels fake.
Exactly.
Just like here's one with a lot of
That's
information.
why I
I'm
freaked
getting
out.
goosebumps on my arm. Everything you're gonna read in these letters, I confirmed. I confirmed everything.
Fucking caves. We know where fucking
I know
caves
where the
are.
caves
Where
are.
fucking people are disappearing. There's
Monsters coming out of them. People
Why
coming
didn't
out
you
of
tell me
caves.
about this before now?
because we fucking flipped out because I thought somebody saw it. I didn't fucking know what to do.
Yeah.
I just didn't know what to fucking do about it because
And
I
we-
thought somebody was fucking with us.
For the most part, we needed to like make sure that this wasn't a hoax because it felt a lot like a hoax.
It does. The first, yeah.
And the fact that it happened the day that you
The
went to
day
North
before I
Carolina.
left.
Mhm. And the day of your being there.
And
It took
that's
2 whole
that's what I'm
days.
saying. The intention of what we're doing, it's like one big ritual, and the pinpoints like a video game. When you reach them,
So you
it's
went
opening another
to North
door.
Carolina on
With this
what
shit.
day? Like, let's not talk theories and intention and ritual
What
shit.
it was
yeah,
like
The
January
date should probably be
31st
in
or
the
something,
email.
right?
yeah, like the
We can
date's
find
here,
it.
but
we
I
can
don't
find,
know
We can find the exact date.
what day you went. Like, like I feel like you guys are putting me on.
No.
No, that's what
I know.
happened. This is
why
how
do
we
you think
felt
we
for,
waited
like,
so long to fucking say anything about it?
This is
I didn't know what to do.
This
a
is
mutual
strange.
friend told me to contact you
Get
and
to
said
it.
you helped him
Listen.
once before.
it's
He
a
won't
risk.
tell us who it is.
But we know
But won't
it's
tell
a
us who it
different
is.
name. Get to it. You'll
He
get
said-
to it. Keep
Yeah,
let
it's
him
all-
read
it's
through
all in
it.
there.
Let him read
And
through
then she
it.
fucking said, then she's
Just-
like, oh,
he
it's
gets
the
through.
same fucking thing happening
It's
over again.
It's
But the-
literally the same puppeteer.
the best-
Whoever.
The best part about it
My
though,
brain right now is just like, this can't be real.
Welcome to my fucking life. But there's so much old stuff in there and so many
She shouldn't
parallels
know
to the earlier stuff.
No. Fuck off.
What?
What?
Slough.
Slough. That's what I was
Yes.
waiting for. Slough.
Fucking fuck.
But listen,
Because that's the group of people that would be throwing that term around.
Yep.
Yeah.
She's
Listen,
in the group of people.
she knows that term because of the puppeteer that's been talking to her, which
She
is
knows
Wrist.
that term because
Wrist.
Wrist isn't puppeteer, he's a player.
But now we're in it. We're in it now. This is it. This
So
is
now
this is
we're
the
in
beginning.
it.
This is well, here's the thing. The end of Hellier is the beginning of this now.
So I realize that's a lot to drop on you like the day before you go back, but it's feeling like a better time then.
Okay.
You remember when Strand went to North Carolina?
Yeah.
Greg got
Oh,
used
is
the
this
night
about
before.
this? Oh gosh. Wait. I don't know who this is. My name is Amy. My date of birth is. I don't know if I want to get into this one.
Yeah.
He responded quickly. Almost everyone I know involved. The CIA, the Marine, and Navy. I want to be. Of course we're going to dig into it all. But immediately I'm kind of like, she's throwing out everything.
Mm-hmm.
It's military cover-ups. It's creepy Wiccan rituals. It's secret societies and Illuminati.
It's like too much.
I'm afraid taking a leap of faith and coming here is about the only way you're going to get the answers you seek. You know, I was not expecting all this. I was not expecting any of this. But I was immediately a pretty hard no on pursuing this lead. Because that's just at this point it doesn't become fun anymore, you know? When you're looking into these sort of disappearances, and it's like, this is for law enforcement. But she hit a couple of key notes, and I was mostly annoyed that we couldn't just rip these emails up and throw them away. At a certain level, you have to trust your gut.
The gut feels bad on this one.
Yeah, it does. And there's no clear direction. I don't like this one. I don't know.
So basically, for about 2 hours after Greg and Tyler and Dana told me this, Greg basically just threw down and had an argument for like 2 hours with Strand.
I'm not saying I don't want to go. I do want to go. I want to go, but I want to do it right, and I want to be safe when we do it. And I'm telling you,
Can't let this sit.
I'm not saying.
I know what you're trying to say, but it's all fear-based.
It's not fear. It's a rational fear. We had to figure out, is this something that we need to pursue? I was nervous about it. I was really scared. And it weighed on me. Strand and I got into a bit of an argument because Strand was ready to go. He wanted to leave immediately. We had to go and do this. We had to do it before they packed up and left. I was of the mindset that we needed to prepare properly. We needed to figure out where we were going to go, how we were going to do this, who we were going to talk to, how do we stay incognito. I'm nervous because Amy says you're already on their radar. I didn't want anyone to know that I was poking around in this yet, or that I was even taking it seriously yet. So we got into a bit of a fight about what to do.
But I'm not gonna fear death and things that we don't know are going to occur. It's nonsensical, super
It's not
amplified levels
nonsensical.
of fear. I'm telling you, this phenomena, it's feeding off of that. It wants to be afraid. So why be? I'm not afraid of this. This stuff has been going on with everything we've read. This has been going on forever. It's the same thing. People have been looking into it forever. And it's never going to change. The amount of info that we have is not going to change. We can keep dissecting it, overanalyzing it, fearing it. Being like, well, no, I'm not ready. I'm not ready for this. We need to do this first. Or we have to look into this more. We have enough info. That's not going to change. We can keep dissecting stuff down to the smallest grain of sand. It's still not changing the fact that it came from the same fucking rock that we know is there. It doesn't matter how much we scrutinize stuff or look into it. I don't think it's ever going to change.
Then what's the fucking point?
Because we have to find out what's going on.
Why?
Because that's what we do.
Because that's what we do.
That's what we do. So let's fucking do the recon. I told you I'm fine with the recon.
I'm fine with doing recon, but it like has to be so
covert,
so low key.
I don't know.
I don't know how to do it. I don't know how to appropriately.
We know.
I'm
we
talking
gotta
about
be
it.
safe.
I'm done talking about it.
I know you are. I'm just saying go.
I
do
agree.
it safe.
I
do
agree.
The recon.
Go.
Yeah.
Do it safe. There. We're on the same page. But I don't want to talk about it anymore. This is exactly what I was fucking so afraid of happening.
What? What's that?
A fucking zero control and going crazy.
You're not going crazy.
No, the conversations we're having are crazy.
They're not.
It's insane. What are we doing, Tyler?
We are doing recon at Somerset. We're on the outskirts now. So far, everything, it looks as I'd expect.
Continue on
Rural
US
Kentucky.
150.
I was 100% not on board for Greg and Strand to go to Somerset and do recon. I just wasn't into the idea. It seemed like a terrible idea. I know Strand tends to be the kind of person who kind of runs headfirst into something, and I didn't want this to be the situation that he ran headfirst into. I knew that it was in a rural area, so they probably wouldn't have great cell phone service. I specifically told both of them not to go in caves, and I specifically, mentioned to them to kind of check in with me and drop pins so that I knew where they were.
Oh, look at this. This is insane. Holy shit. See anything weird on the ground?
Yeah. And I was comfortable with it by those terms, but of course that's not what happened.
Another world. This probably connects to the mammoth cave system for all we know.
Holy fuck, how far back does it go?
Look at this. Oh my god, dude, look. It's literally an entrance to like the underworld here. Insane. Look at this. This is amazing. This is deep.
Oh, Jesus. Here. Yo, dude, we can't go.
No, we can't. Here. Here, give me this. Give me the light. We just gotta get... Just gotta get right there.
God damn it.
Okay. Oh my god, dude.
What is it?
This is fucking huge. It's just fucking huge.
Oh, shit. You can see. Right down in there. That's where the water's coming from.
It starts now. It's activated.
Strand and I went much further into the cave than I think we anticipated we were going to go. And while we were there, we start to hear these sounds coming from far off down further in the cave. And it sounded like people. It sounded like there were people whispering.
Can you almost hear voices?
Yes.
I can hear somebody. You hear that? Oh, fuck, I want to go there so bad. We're so close.
Yeah, you think. All right, let's turn around and go. Fuck. We need to leave.
Look at this place, though. Oh, so weird. Oh my god. What the fuck? There's bones. They talked about stuff being eaten in here.
You see the size of that fucking bone?
What?
Look at that. What? The size of those bones.
I know. Look at this. This is a piece of the skull. No. Maybe.
One of the last things that we found in the cave were just big piles of bones. All these little piles everywhere. They didn't look big enough to be human, but whatever it was that brought those bones in had to be fairly large, because these weren't small animal bones. It didn't seem like, anyway. There's vertebrae here. There's fucking ribs.
Oh my god.
So something's dragging shit in here to eat.
Look at the size of that bone over there.
No, something's dragging stuff in here to eat it.
Oh my god. This might be the church. That cabin might be somewhere in the woods, like near here. But it could be anywhere. Might be able to find it through satellite images. It makes more sense her saying the entrance is off of Halebridge Road, which we're technically still on.
I think we're on Halebridge Road.
I think this is the chapel. She mentions this chapel. This one's upkept. So I'm pretty sure this is where the incident in the first emails occurred.
Right off the bat, there were similarities between the Amy emails and the David emails that just felt significant to us. It started with even just the subject line. David's subject line was urgent help needed, please respond. Amy's subject line was urgent life and death. But even, from there, just having a stranger reach out who doesn't personally know of or know Greg, learned about Greg through a mysterious figure that Greg doesn't know either. They're both normal people who had some kind of a strange supernatural experience related to the cave systems in rural Kentucky, in the woods, seemingly a similar type of phenomena and environment. And then they disappear completely off the grid. That stood out. It felt significant. I know Greg gets a lot of strange emails, given the work that he does, talking about weird experiences, but there was something very similar between these two. What was almost more interesting, too, was the opposites in the emails. Like, it almost seemed like an overcorrection by the phenomena, to the point that David was a ghost who had zero information about him. The Amy email, she gives us her date of birth, everything about her, addresses, names of people in the town. Greg found her immediately. But where David was, apparently a doctor, he was very eloquent at the least, very detailed, he supplied photos. Amy was much more marginalized and much more chaotic. She was typing it out on a cell phone. There's misspellings. Very different in that regard, but similar structurally at their core.
In the emails that Amy sent to us, she mentions euphonauts and she mentions slough. Those were the words that we couldn't overlook.
If Amy didn't learn this word through research, then obviously the other, possibly more likely scenario is that she learned it from Terry or from somebody who's in that circle who uses that kind of term to refer to the goblins. And if that's the case, that makes her even scarier, because now we're dealing with somebody who's in the know with these circles that are obviously very, very intimidating.
One of the things that really stuck out to me in Amy's email was this reference to something called the Gatekeeper. And immediately it made me think about all these reports we had been digging up from hundreds of years back all the way into the present day of creatures holding these staves or wands that can paralyze people.
The Gatekeeper is the scariest of them all. He can actually perform magic. I literally began to suffocate as he whispered and blew me a kiss, holding this curved, weird walking stick and a crystal.
Amy should not have known about these wands or the staves. It's just seems like a really obscure element to include.
The other thing that's a common theme when I get into this is not only do a lot of these reports have things holding wands, but you'll hear a lot about cloaked figures. According to Brad Steiger, a woman named Norma Hall felt sure that she had encountered a subterranean humanoid as she lay dozing one night in a motel room. She was shocked to see a dark, smallish figure standing motionless in the corner of the room. She soon saw that it was a hooded figure in a dark robe. I switched on the lamp on the nightstand, she stated, and he put his hand to shield his eyes from the bright light. This thing keeps its head down because it doesn't like the sunlight beating on it. That's another recurring theme we see, is these things, a sensitivity to light. When I got out of bed, I towered over him. I was amazed that he seemed even shorter when I stood before him. He was scarcely 5 feet tall. Only his very large eyes, with their black pupils, seemed alive. His eyes and his little twitching nose and lips, he reminded me of a large gray rat standing there, and I still shudder every time I think of him. So there's a tale here from November 1997. 2 young outdoorsmen, 22-year-old Dwayne Berger and his friend Mark, 20, had decided to camp near an old deserted copper mine in Arizona. By the time it was dark, we had each downed a couple of long neck beers, Dwayne later said, and we were just sitting around the fire feeling pretty good about life in general, when we began to hear these terrible screams that seemed to be coming from the old mine. She hears these screams that she thinks is initially a bobcat, so we have this already another similar narrative. The screams sounded female, and there was more than one of them screaming out at once in what sounded like pain, as if they were being hurt. Bravely, the 2 entered the mouth of the tunnel, weapons and flashlight in hand. And it says here in quotes, "We had barely walked a dozen yards when we saw a greenish glow ahead of us. As we got closer, we could make out the dark figures of 2 men in hooded robes. As they drew closer, they saw that the hooded figures were barely 5 foot tall. Then the little men produced what appeared to be wands of some type, from which a yellow light erupted, striking the 2 and instantly rendering them immobile."
Even Jacques Vallée, the UFO researcher who wrote Passport to Magonia, he talks about these same wands in his book Dimensions.
These reports just keep going and going.
According to the November 1950 issue of Fate magazine, a similar fate awaited 2 young boys from Pike County. The youths were seen entering into the old truck coal mine 3 miles east of Pikeville. Then they never came back out. A full-scale search of the mine failed to turn up any evidence of the missing boys. What's weird, when I was looking into Pike County, you fast forward into the year 2008, and that same ridgeway that overlooks that same mine has Bigfoot sightings crawling along the ridges. Years later, a woman from Pendleton County named Patsy Wingate would claim to have disturbing dreams that might have some relevance here. Wingate mentions a mountain near Riverton, Kentucky, where a certain UFO was seen on several occasions. Once while on the mountain, she heard strange humming sounds she was certain were coming from underground. Later that night, she had the most frightening and vivid dreams of children underground on the mountain begging for help. Researcher Ronald Kellis told of a tunnel laborer digging underground in 1770 who heard a roaring sound behind a large flat stone. Curious, he pried away the stone with pick and crowbar and was amazed to see a smooth stone stairway leading down into the earth. Suddenly, the stairway ended and the man was standing in a large stone cavern filled with gigantic machines. The astonished laborer glanced about the well-lit room, then saw hastening toward him a strangely clad hooded figure. The being held a baton-like object in his upraised hand.
I mean, the wands start to show up in...
They're in everything. There's even another report from an old Native American man in the West who's talking about the things in the Mojave Desert that live in the mountains there. I think they call them, I don't know if I'm pronouncing this, it's like the Have-Masu. They have these objects that are like wands, these metal rods. He goes, and when they point them at you, they can do, he said something, they can immobilize you. He goes, or they'll take out another object that's like a rod, and all death will follow.
Some of the information that Tyler was telling us really sort of came out of left field for me. This wasn't the portion of the phenomena that I had necessarily researched, but finding out that these robed, hooded figures carrying wands could either be occultists, which is the natural thing to think, or could actually be strange creatures, some sort of members of the phenomena themselves. It made me even more weary because now we have to think about, in that little portion on the back of our mind, we have to think about the possibility that if we run into one of these things, they apparently are now armed with weapons in the form of wands. One of the stranger things I didn't think I'd ever have to think about.
So, to go further into that, I figured if she was telling any ounce of truth, she's talking about people being tortured, human sacrifice, all this stuff, kids in the mines, caves. And like, if that stuff's happening, you would think there would at least be some bizarre reports of people going missing or people dying in these caves. Well, here's what's strange about that. There are multiple deaths in these caves quite often. I'm not going to jump to wild conclusions, but there are some reports here that are kind of unsettling. And we have here, spelunker found dead inside Wayne County cave. We found his hoodie. It had been shredded, just ripped up, he said. And about 200 feet in, they found his body. The way the gear was scattered through the cave, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't. No, nothing wrong with him. Items scattered all throughout, clothing ripped up. Nothing wrong with him. Erisman was not stuck or injured, and there was no evidence of foul play. I mean, there's a lot of weird murders that are really strange and unanswered, but I didn't include any of these. There's a lot that I've read. On Saturday, someone riding an all-terrain vehicle saw a body in a brush pile off Strawberry Road. During one of these forums, in the discussion of cave locations and entrances, someone's talking about that cave. It says, oh, word of warning about the Strawberry Cave. There's another cave below that bluff across the road. Not sure if it connects, but I have reason to believe something big is living in there. I've seen entire cow carcasses drug into that cavern and partially eaten. What the fuck? There's bones. Someone responds to this, and they go, I heard a loud thrashing in the bushes, and this thing around 10 foot or so came running out of the bushes right in front of me. Well, what I saw looked more like a Yeti. That thing stood there looking at me for a couple of minutes, making some sort of muttering sounds like a baby crying.
You could hear every night now it's okay with some words, you always hear like a baby crying or something like that.
The crying baby phenomenon is common not only among UFO witnesses, but also among thousands of ghost and monster witnesses as well.
But here's what makes that cave a little bit more interesting. It gives us a very specific address. This is Hale Bridge Road here on the map. This is where Strawberry Road is.
It's separated by 12 minutes in a fairly, driving. Halebridge Road, where this dot is, where this line of passage goes to connect the two, is literally the passageway of the second longest cave in Kentucky.
The whole time that Strand is laying all of this out, it's just sinking further and further into my brain that this is Hellier all over again. It has to do with cave systems, potentially even the Mammoth Cave system again. It has to do with strange creatures in these caves and people being terrorized by these strange creatures. And now, all of a sudden, there's all of this extra scary stuff that none of us would have ever seen coming.
Now, I didn't do as much research as Tyler did into the Somerset and all this stuff, but the little that I did uncovered some weird similarities and parallels. A simple Google search of Somerset and the Green Man turns up a New Yorker article about Julia Somerset, who was the wife of the Earl of Somerset, Somerset, England, overseas. She wrote one article of folklore in her lifetime in 1939, in which she basically laid out the origins and history of the Green Man. She named the Green Man. The fact that we even know it as such today was from this woman, Julia Somerset.
There is a lot of different ideas attached and associated with the Green Man. But for the most part, the Green Man is an archetype or a deity that is he often appears in pagan circles. He represents the woods, woodland, the harvest, being in nature. He's sort of a guardian of those spaces and is interacted with a lot by a majority of the pagan community as sort of an archetype that represents a spirit behind nature.
The idea of a green man has nothing to do with human sacrifice. It has to do with death, but it's natural death. It's death and renewal. So if there was some cult dedicated to the Green Man, it doesn't make sense that they would be performing human sacrifice.
Amy mentions Beltane specifically in the emails, which is really interesting when you talk about the Green Man because he is so connected to that specific Sabbath. Beltane is a Celtic fire festival. It's the end of spring and the beginning of summer. And in a lot of, in the Wiccan tradition, there's a belief that at that point in time, if we look at the cycles of nature, the goddess and the god come together. And it's a very kind of sensual festival. It has a lot to do with creating life. When you think about summer, we're about to come into a time when gardens are full and things are coming into fruition and we're enjoying the benefits of a lot of that kind of stuff. And the Green Man is often the deity that's represented as the god during that festival.
So over here, if you check it out, that's Hopkinsville, that's Cave City, which was that's Somerset, and that's Hellier.
While Strand is looking into all of these, newspaper articles about deaths that are happening, Karl is looking into all of these locations that have some kind of a connection.
If you draw a line between them roughly, and between the averaging them all, they're basically in kind of what looks like a straight line. To make matters weirder, all four of these points fall on the 37th parallel.
The 37th parallel is a theory that was popularized a few years ago by Ben Mesrick. He wrote a book with the same title, and it basically says that between the 36th and the 38th parallel is where there's an abnormally large string of strangeness. Everything from UFO sightings to cattle mutilations to just straight up paranormal phenomena. And it basically lays out this idea that there's something going on that line around the planet that makes it extraordinarily weird.
It's statistically interesting because if you look at for really populated cities in that area, you won't actually find many. Most of the cities exist above or below that, especially in different coastal regions. So you would expect more sightings in those areas with more people. But because it sort of cuts across this fairly rural area of the United States, it seems like something worth paying attention to.
When I drew a vertical line between Ashland and the risk coordinates, they intersected the horizontal line right beside Hellier. So then I started drawing more lines, and I thought, all right, let's put Stillwater Bridge. Interesting. Threw up Stillwater Bridge on there. Also thought, let's find the exact spot of these tin can UFOs that were seen so close in Minnesota. Turns out, if you draw a line from the tin can UFO sighting through Stillwater Bridge, it goes right through Point Pleasant.
That's bizarre.
It's pretty weird. There's a nearly perfect line that goes from Point Pleasant to Ashland to Somerset. If you continue further and you draw a line between the risk coordinates and Cave City, you wind up almost exactly 1.5 miles from my apartment. And if you go even further and you draw a line between Table Rock, where you guys visited, you went to Cave City shortly thereafter that, where you guys visited. And then where did you guys go after that when you got so distracted from Hellier?
Mount Shasta.
Finding Bigfoot at Mount Shasta.
Get out of here.
Right?
What? Is that right over the peak?
Fucking peak.
Right over the
center
peak.
of it. Goes right through the circle of that mountain.
And like the whole story with that was about, you know, things living in the mountain and UFOs coming out of the mountain.
This book right here, A Dweller on Two Planets, is literally a tale that's torn between a guy spending time on Venus and going underground in Mount Shasta.
And the spot where Woody Derenberger met Indrid Cold was very specific, where he said he met him. So I put that in on the map. And that one lines up directly in line with the Point Pleasant, Ashland, Somerset line. Now, if you look at that Woody Derenberger meeting spot, Point Pleasant, Ashland, chronologically, that's the progression of Indrid Cold's locations where he visited people. So with Somerset being on that line, you have some interesting implications there about whether or not perhaps Indrid Cold might have passed through that area. I try to use a lot of different control points on this. I put Rashad's house in Willits in it. I put Tenny's place in Royal Oak into it. A bunch of different outlying points just to test against. And there are places that you try and you can't make them line up with anything. Also, it's very hard to draw a straight line on a globe. Yeah. There is some room for, you know, error and embellishment, but they're close enough. There's a high degree of strangeness.
I'd emailed Amy back and forth a bunch of times, and her story didn't really change. I just didn't know what we could really do about it. So when we decided it was time to reach out to her again, I sent her an email and I didn't get a response. And I waited, and I sent her another email and got no response. And immediately I just thought the worst. Well, doing a little digging, it turns out she was in jail. There were a list of charges related to breaking and entering and burglary. There was some possession on there. But we knew that she was in a space where she wasn't going anywhere. And because of that, I didn't feel like we had a ticking clock to chase, because she was, it seemed, safe.
We always had the concern, how do we do it safely? How do we have a good means of staying in a centralized zone to really study the phenomena? I came across a location that is literally directly off of Buck Creek that overlooks the river. And take a look at this map here. The Buck Creek Bungalows, which is that location that we can go to settle down, is right here. This river is Buck Creek. Hale Bridge Road is right here. That is literally walking distance.
and with paddleboards and kayaks that's literally overlooking a river. It gives us a perfect viable means of having every reason to be there. So we have the perfect alien cave-based task force HQ